Alright, I'm going to pick up on step 9 on the Access Module 5 SAM Project 1A. So step 9, we're going to actually start working with changing some of the table information. So we're going to stop working on the queries a little bit. So the first thing we want to do is open the location table. So I'm just going to double click it to open it. And it wanted us to open it in design view. So I'm going to switch my view because by default it opens in datasheet view. So I'm switching to design, and we want to change that manager ID field to a lookup field. So here we have our manager ID field, and to change it to a lookup field we actually need to go over to our data type and go down here to our lookup wizard. And then it goes through a series of steps of how we actually want that to do the lookup. So we want to specify that the lookup field values will come from another table. So by default that was selected, so I'm going to click next. And we want to select the last field and the employee ID field from the employee table. So we want to select employee table, and I'm going to click next. And then those fields that we wanted to select was last and then employee ID. And so now we want to go ahead and click next, and we want to sort those values in ascending order by last name. So go ahead and click next, and we want to make sure we have this hide key column checked. And I'll just show you, if we don't have it checked, notice we have this split up into two different columns. We're not actually wanting to see the employee ID, we want to see the employee last name. So I'm going to make sure that's checked, and then to resize that column, we just make sure we have our pointer on the right edge of the column, and we just can double click it, and that'll resize it to fit the contents. And I'm going to select next, and then the instruction tells us to just accept the name that it defaulted to. So the next thing we want to do is click finish. We don't want to change anything else. And it says this table must be saved before relationship can be created. So we want to say yes. And now to check it, we want to switch over to our datasheet view. And you should see 3 records, and we actually are going to make one minor change, or maybe a major change, to the very first record in location ID A. So we want to change that manager ID from Walker to Carlson. And I'm just going to hit enter or tab to move out of that cell to make sure it accepted that text. And it has, so I'm going to save it again, and I'm just going to go ahead and close that table. That's all we're doing on that table. So step 10, so we want to actually do another change to a table. This time we're going to do the billing table. So I'm going to double click the billing table, and again we want to be in design view. By default we're in datasheet view. So now we want to create a validation rule for the sessions field. So I'm going to click down here on sessions. That way my field properties that are visible are for sessions. And to do that validation rule, we want to, it tells us that we only want to allow values greater than 0. So that rule simply is greater than 0. And then we do want to include some validation text with that. And that text is clients must participate in at least one session, and we want to have that period after that. And so now we can simply close or save the table. We are going to get a pop-up that tells us the data integrity rules have been changed, and we just want to click yes. Okay, and we can go ahead and close this table now. Alright, so step 11. Now we want to navigate to the client table. So I'm going to double click that client table, and I want to change it to design view. So on this one we want to use the input mask wizard to add an input mask for the phone field. So right now if we switch back to datasheet view, we just have all the phone digits running together. So I'm going back to design view. So to do that input mask, I'm going to click on the field name phone so that I have the field properties for phone. And when I come down here to input mask, if I click into that cell, then I have the option to all the way to the right click those three little dots, which pops up my input mask wizard. And here's where we can actually designate how we want that phone number to appear. So we want to choose the very first option, phone number, and that's how we want it to appear. So I'm going to select next. This is how it should appear. Do you want to change the input mask? So we're just saying yes, we do. And how do you want to store the data? So we want to store it without the symbols in the mask like this. So we want to leave this second option selected. And so next, and so that's all the information the wizard needs. So now we can just hit finish. And notice in the input mask now you have the telephone number, and it has some punctuation marks and different stuff to designate that input mask is there. So now if we change our, if we switch back to datasheet view, well, first it's telling us we must save the table, and we want to do that. We want to save that input mask, and now we can look at this list of phone numbers and see that input mask has been applied. But it also has one final step. We want to change the phone field value for the record with client ID A10026. So we just want to come in here and we want to change the last part of that phone number. So it should be 716-555. And I want to type in 000001. I'm just going to hit enter to accept it, and that's it for that one. So we want to go ahead and save that table again and close it. Alright, so for step 12, we want to view the table, the client table. So actually we're going to open it again, and we're going to switch that view to design view. So this time we want to create another validation rule, and this time we want it to be in the gender field. So I'm going to select gender, or put my insertion point in the gender field name so that my field properties are for gender, and my validation rule this time is going to be, and remember this is text, so we have to put those quotation marks around it. So F or, and in quotation marks I'm going to put M. And then our validation text for this rule is must be F or M. And so again, we want to save this table, and we're going to get that pop-up telling us the data integrity rules have been changed, and that's fine. So we want to click yes. And now it wants us to switch to the datasheet view, and it wants us to test the field validation rule for the gender field, making sure any tested field values are the same as they were before you tested. So what we can do is you can confirm this by retyping the correct value or by pressing the escape key. So if we come over here, and right now we have Maria Johnson listed as a female. If I try to type in female, first of all, it's not going to let me. And if I try to just type in a random letter, like P, I'm going to get this pop-up that says must be female or male, or essentially it must be an F or an M. So I'm going to say, oh, okay. So now I can go back and I can change that back to the F. Okay, so we want to save that and then go ahead and close this table. Alright, so step 13, we want to create a cross-tab query based on the employee table with the following options. So now we're going back to the create, and this time we're going to use the query wizard, and we want to use this cross-tab query. So I'm going to click OK, and it wants us to use the location ID field values for the row headings. So we want to base it on the employee table, so I'm going to select the employee table first, and then I'm going to select next, and we want to select for the field value that we want to show as the heading, we want to select location ID. And so we can see this as the heading. So we'll go ahead and click next. And then we want to use the title field values for the column headings. So here we're finding the column headings. So we want to select title. So we have location for rows, and we have title for columns. So we're going to go ahead and click next. And we want to use the sum of the monthly salary field values. So when we select monthly salary, then we get a list of functions that we can choose from. And so the instruction tells us we want the sum, and we do want to include rows. So if you do not have this checked by default, make sure you check yes, include sum rows, and go ahead and click next. And we want to save this query as query monthly salary by title. And so we can finish it, which runs the query, and then all we have to do is save that query and close it. And that concludes this project. So at this point you're ready to save it and submit it, and if you experience any issues or have any questions, as always, feel free to send me an email or give me a call. Thanks.